The meeting is in order. Everyone should be aware that this meeting is now being recorded. And as such, if there's any concerns about that, please feel free to speak so now or happily depart from the meeting. Hearing that no one has any intention of wanting to depart from the meeting, I want to welcome everyone. And I ask that for those who have not been familiar with the exec committee meeting, we're not going to go through the normal protocols of how the meeting works. I think everybody is familiar with how the exec committee meeting works. We'll move to, we'll consider agenda item number 1 complete. I'll entertain a motion to accept tonight's agenda. Ms. Fibers, can I get a second? Mr. Gordon, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Either raise your hand or say aye or yes.
Aye.
Thank you so much. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes of September 2021 from the exec committee meeting? Are there any noted corrections or modifications?
I gave a few to the office today, very minor.
Thank you. Any other comments or noted corrections? Hearing none, I would advise that if you should have any subsequent changes, please send them into the office and they'll be included in the minutes. With that, I'll entertain a motion to accept the committee's accept the minutes from September 2021. That's Ms. Fibers, second Ms. Gringer. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Yes.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. So I want to make two notes tonight. One, in the absence of the chair for the Transportation and Public Safety Committee, Mr. Sid Meyer, and that the fact that there isn't a vice chair at the moment, John Quinn has agreed to represent the committee tonight. John Quinn is the secretary for the committee and probably the person who is best equipped to speak to whatever transpired in the previous meeting, should that be a part of a discussion, but clearly be able to present under the committee's report. The second thing I want to mention is, in addition to John Quinn, you may see another name, and I'm pleased to announce that Nicole McKnight will be joining tonight's executive committee meeting and the committee meetings going forward, because she is, to my desire, agreed to serve as the vice chair of the Health, Environment, and Social Services Committee, led by Mr. Brandon Smith. So Nicole, we welcome you to the committee. Thank you so much for taking on the additional role. I know you have a busy schedule, but you come highly recommended by Brandon, so that made it easy. And so let me take a minute. Nicole, if you would, do you want to kind of just introduce yourself and give some brief remarks about your, your background?
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Nicole McKnight, and I've been a part of the HES subcommittee for over a year now. But by way of background, I've been living in Clinton Hills for over 20 years. My background is in healthcare. I work with the federal government, Department of Health and Human Services, and I've been with them for over 20-something years. So my interests, what I work and what I do for a living and what I do in my volunteer time pretty much align. And I've been living at 21 St. James Place. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's a Mitchell-Lama co-op for over 15 years. So I don't know if there is anything else you would like to know, but feel free to ask.
Actually, that's fantastic. Anything else might get you some unwanted visitors. So that's fantastic. Given that background, gave more than I anticipated, but fantastic. So I think clearly from Nicole's background and the recommendation from Mr. Smith, she's the right person to serve as the vice chair for that committee. And so I'm hoping that it'll continue to keep the committee trending in a very positive way, but in some cases alleviate a little of the management responsibilities that have fallen on Brandon's shoulders for so many years, and Brandon continues to do an excellent job of leading that committee. So to you, Brandon, and to Nicole, thank you for your leadership.
Thanks, and congrats, Nicole. Looking forward to working with you.
Okay. The other thing I want to mention, and this is really just a simple reminder. There's no need for anybody to send me an email tomorrow asking me what did I mean. There's no need for anybody to call me after the meeting to ask what I mean. There's no need for anyone to send me a text to say, what did you mean? It is simply to say that as chair and co-chairs, I just encourage everyone within your respective powers to make sure that we try to keep a harmonious, collegial meeting, right? There are going to be times when people get passionate about issues. I'm fine with that. There are going to be times where we may not agree on issues. I'm fine with that. But in no way is this an indication to prohibit people from speaking their mind. They're allowed to. If you have a time limit in your respective committees, just do the best you can to make sure people adhere to the time limit. But we just need to respect each other. So that's more than a reminder. Do not call me, do not text me, do not email me to figure out what this means. It is simply a reminder. So in that same context, if anybody has any questions, which I don't think there should be any, I'll pause to see if you have any questions. Fantastic. Again, what I would say is two more items on my chairperson's report. I'm looking to have a meeting coming up very shortly with the Department of Homeless Services. You know, as I mentioned before, and have been mentioned by other elected officials, and even from board members who may not be part of the executive committee, you know, we have a concern in our district about homelessness. And I want to be really clear, as I've communicated to other individuals, I'm not looking for a solution just to gather a group of people and putting them in a location. I'm looking for something that really speaks to services, providing people with healthcare, education, helping to aid where possible, a way to get people off of some of the challenges that sometimes life offers individuals. And so to the extent that we can be a committee, or to the extent that I can be a voice representing the entire board in a way that helps those services be addressed in the community, I'm happy to do it. But to go one step further, put forth a solution so that one community board or one district isn't unfairly populated with those services. And we should make sure that those services are spread out equally throughout all of the districts, whether it be councilmatic district or community board district, so that a citywide crisis doesn't get overburdened in one area. And so as those meetings finalize and we have a date, I'll be more than certain to come back and report to this body and the entire Community Board 2 body about what the outcome of those meetings are. And I'll keep everyone in the loop on how those progress going forward. I also wanted to mention 2 resignations. So we have a resignation from Community Board 2 from Clenita Medley. She's been a longtime member of Community Board 2. And, you know, as life would have it, life is, you know, sometimes brings different challenges to all of us. She has submitted her resignation and she needs to focus her attentions elsewhere. I've had a conversation with Clenita. I wish her the very best. I hope that she can be successful in her future endeavors, and you know, she'll be missed. And then the other resignation we have is Mr. Dwight Smith, who's been doing a fantastic job over the various years, being the representative for the Atlantic Yards representation for Community Board 2, has see it fit now that he needs to step down from that role. And so he and I are going to debrief a bit so I can understand what some of his concerns may be offline. He clearly has indicated that this resignation is really more about life changes, not that there was anything negative happening. He was actually a little saddened that he can no longer facilitate in that role, but he's done an excellent job. And so I wanted to make sure that we spoke, I have a conversation with him to find out a little bit more so that it would give me greater insight to make recommendations about who the next representative for CB2 will be. And then last but not least, I want to thank Dorothea Thompson Manning for agreeing to serve as the representative from Community Board 2 for the Borough Board meetings. So, the Borough Hall brings all of the representatives from community boards together. And at various times, it has been different members of the board. It has been the district manager, the assistant district manager, and to bring a level of continuity and someone who I know will give a thorough report based on the information that's shared, ask questions, and truly represent Community Board 2. Dorothea was a natural fit, and I'm thankful again that this is another person who's agreed to say yes. So Dorothea, thank you so much for taking on that role. You know that Caroline, myself, Taya, the entire team will be here to support you any way we can, but wanted to say thank you for agreeing to take on that role.
And I'll just say thank you for giving me the opportunity to represent Community Board 2. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, that concludes my chairperson's report this evening. Again, feel free to contact me should you have questions, or if there's anything you want to share offline. I'm more than happy to engage and work with all of you as colleagues. So with that, let's move on to agenda item number 5, committees for action. At this time, I'll turn it over to Carlton Gordon to represent the land use items.
Thank you, Lenny. Okay, we have 5 items on the Landmark Preservation Commission applications, certificates of appropriateness. The first, I'll just say as a preface, the first one is one that we did turn down, and the remaining 4 were ones that we approved. All right, the first one, which we did turn down, is at 265 Lafayette Avenue in Clinton Hill. It's the, what is it called? It's a church, the Apostolic Community Church in Clinton Hill. And what they were asking for is basically a new sign. You could sort of see in the corner, from the church in the photograph there, the Google Maps photo, the sign. They wanted to put a new sign in, which would have LED and would be redone, would be modernized, a little bit modernized. And we felt that the proposed sign would not fit in the community or with the church, with a very old historic church. And this is something that we've been recently struggling with, that the churches do want to put in some kind of signage that will work. And we also got the Clinton Hill group also did state that they felt that the proposed sign just was not fitting in with a historic district. So we did reject it 7-0, but also with a provision or a friendly amendment from Daughtry Christopherson. What Daughtry had proposed and we accepted was that the church would work with the community group, the Clinton Hill group, and if possible, get some advice from Landmarks Preservation Commission so that a future proposal or future application for a sign, try to get it fixed, new, I guess, upgraded at the same time with something that would be acceptable to the community and to us as well. So we did turn that one down. It was, we're not happy to turn these down, but this one just did not fit. All right, now moving on to the 4 that we did accept. 141 Gates Avenue, which is also in Clinton Hill. And on this one, it's basically a lot of work around the building. They're doing some work on the windows to establish some windows, but they're not changing any of the bulk or the physical structure of the building itself. Some of the work is done at the rear, which is basically for a balcony, and it was one that we did like, and we approved that one 9-0. We're now moving into the rest of the items are in Brooklyn Heights. The next one is 155 Henry Street. And this is an interesting one. We did approve this one 9-0. Yes, not no. We approved this one barely. 5, 2 noes, and 2 abstentions. On this one, it's a multiple dwelling with a central main entrance door, and it's been there for quite a while. And what they had proposed was a changes in the exterior as you enter at the entrance door. There are a group of, they want to change the glass so that, when you, the glass, windows, so that when you're coming through the entrance door, it'll be a bit more clearer and a bit more modernized. And there are also these spindles, that's the best way we can describe it, at the top of the entrance door, which would be replaced and again, sort of modernized and made to look, real decent. It didn't, while there was some discussion about it, we did decide to approve it 5, 2 noes and 2 abstentions, and the motion on that one passed. The next one also in the Heights is 36 Remsen Street. And this one's more of a 1840s brownstone, more typical of what we usually get. On this one, they're converting it into a single family. And a lot of the work that's being done will be visible from the adjacent, over, not from the front, but from the back, going into Grace Court. So that's why we had to have it. They're doing work on the mechanicals on the roof, adding in some railing. There'll be, it's a new, I was just trying to think what else I have here. Yes, they'll be widening the windows. So it'll no longer be a line, but we like the way it looked. And we like the work that we saw, and we approved that one 9-0. The last one here is 123 Joralemon Street, also in Brooklyn Heights. And this is the one we also approved 9-0. On this one, this is a building that it's almost like a mansion. If you ever walk on Joralemon Street, it's one of the most striking, large 3 to 4 story mansion, I guess you can call the type of a house. And they're doing some work on the dormers. They're doing some work on the bulkheads, new windows. There'll be some brick replacement. The bricks, so that it will match the nice sandy brick that's been there. And as you can see from the photographs, that this is a very distinctive and a very old structure. But the work that's been proposed is what's acceptable. We felt that it will still keep, I guess the look and feel of the historic structure, and we approved this one 9-0 as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlton.
Okay.
I'd like to pull out 265 Lafayette Avenue and have it reviewed independently unless there's any objections. And then if there are any other items that anyone wants to call out separately, executive committee members that want to pull out any of the remaining 4 items that want to be pulled out separately, please do so now. If not, we'll take the rest of the committee's recommendations and the affirmative and vote on them as one package, unless there's any objections from executive committee members.
No objection.
I'd like to make the motion for those, the package, Mr. Singletary, to accept the committee's recommendation.
A second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Barbara Zalek Winger. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Right.
Is there anyone opposed? Any abstentions? So moved. So let's address 265 Lafayette Avenue. Are there any questions on 265 Lafayette Avenue? Barbara?
Yeah, I just have a question, one question. Didn't we have a similar request in the last year or two for that kind of sign in front of a church? Was that a different church?
Different church, yeah, different church. I mean,
And-
not far from it, actually. But in the same, not just, I guess blocks away from it, but yes.
And did we
we're
approve it
starting to
or?
get. We
Did we
approved
approve
that
it?
one.
If I could just
We
interrupt one
approved
second.
that one.
Mr. Gordon, let me
Yes.
just interrupt 1 second to give full context. Barbara, that is a good recollection. And to give a little more context, that church is next door, just to be clear. So the way Lafayette Avenue runs is this church borders Lafayette and Washington. The church next door is connected and it borders Lafayette and St. James, which is right at the next corner. So if you're on the north side of Lafayette Avenue, you're that side between St. James and Washington, only thing on that side of the street are churches.
So how can we justify granting one and not the other?
It's difficult. It's a matter of what we perceive as the aesthetics of the proposal. We are getting, it's the church signs, trying to preserve or make the church signs work is something that we're getting this a little bit more and more. And that's what it really comes right down to is, again, it was objections that were sent to the board office by I think the Clinton Hill Society or Clinton Hill Group. They just felt that the proposed signage, it's really reconstructing and redoing the sign. I mean, there's a sign that's there now. It was partly damaged by a car that was out of control. And they want to try to get it fixed so it looks better. And they also want to try to update it a little bit so that that the messages will be seen, flashed on through LED. And sometimes just on this one, it just didn't work. I think what Daughtry's Christopher's amendment does help a bit to say, look, let's work with the community group, see if we can get some assistance from the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and hopefully they'll come up with a sign that we can improve. But this one just didn't, the committee just did not feel that it was appropriate the way it was designed, or at least it was suggested for the future.
May I add something? It's Irene.
Irene, hold on before you do
Okay.
that. I just want to ask two questions since we're on the topic, and then in this order, I'll take Irene, Daughtry, and Bill Flanoy. Those are the three hands that I saw. So in that order, that's how I'm going to respond to that. Because I know Bill is excited to make sure we all get home in time before the Nor'easter in his contingency drive. So Carlton, a couple of questions. One, what was the response of the applicant? Because, what I recall is that the church on the corner is Emmanuel Baptist Church. This church is Apostolic Faith Church. And just to name so we know what entities we're talking about. As I understand it, Emmanuel has nothing today, and then they're going to bring illumination to their facility. And then Apostolic Faith has the same kind of thing. There's nothing illuminated there, and they're requesting to bring some kind of illumination. I think is the way I understand it. One, but I'm more importantly curious about one other thing, when you mentioned that there's this Clinton Hill group, what was the name of the Clinton Hill group?
I'm trying to remember the name of the group. I'm sorry, I can't. I know they did send letters to the board because I did receive information that, I think from Carolyn Church, that there was some opposition, on 265 Lafayette Avenue. So I know the letters are at the board. So I didn't get a chance to find out what the exact, and when I heard it, I was listening to and I didn't make note of the name of, I'm sorry, I didn't make note of the name of the person who spoke for the Clinton Hill group. I
So
think you're busy really going.
Caroline has put in the chat that is citizens responsible for, let me get the rest of the name on this. Hold on.
I'm
Citizens.
trying to remember the name of the person, she did speak.
Citizens responsible for neighborhood planning.
Yeah,
Okay. Maybe they're a new group. I'm just not familiar with them coming before community board too often, but that could be just my recollection. That's fine. So that's fine. And then Carlton, what was the response from the applicant that were they upset that they have any?
I don't know if they were upset. I mean, I'm sure they were disappointed that they couldn't get it through, but we tried to help them out. So we just didn't say, we're not slamming the door in their face and say, don't come back here. In fact, we said, we tried to work with that group and to try to work, hopefully, with landmarks preservation. Now, we understand that that Landmarks Preservation Commission might or might not give them some assistance. Hopefully, they will be able to, maybe steer them. We're looking for, basically on this one, a sign that would really blend in, I think, with the aesthetics in that part of Clinton Hill. That's what I think what the committee was looking for.
Okay, thanks, Dorothy. I mean,
Yeah.
Irene.
Yeah. The other one, the Emmanuel Baptist, that one involved a sign that was in existence and presumably approved that was actually on the building, not freestanding. And the question was illuminating the lettering. And we even sent them back for more work. We didn't approve it the first time around. We kind of tabled it for them to come back about that. This one for the I can't pronounce it, Apostolic Church.
Apostolic, yeah.
It's a freestanding sign, which makes it much more noticeable. Also, that freestanding sign that they had was never approved in the first place, and now they want to illuminate that. So it was a little more complicated than the first one.
That's helpful. That's
correct.
why I
Yes.
asked the question. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Right. Yes, it did. And the point, Irene, I'll underline what Irene said. When the other church came to us, we did not approve it first time around. We didn't reject it, but we didn't approve it. And they came back, I guess, almost a year later, Irene. It came months later, and we did approve that one after a long time. It wasn't out first time out of the chute either.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that it was the first time out of the shoot. I just know it's subsequently it did get approved. I do appreciate the distinction between freestanding and a sign that's adjacent to the building, but I do recall it does have illumination. So that was the piece of it.
Yeah.
Dorothy,
Miss Janner said everything. Thank you.
Bill,
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the original sign was never approved in the first place.
Denise. Denise, did you have your hand up? Okay, Dorothea.
Switch over to my, good evening, everyone. Yeah, I did. Yeah, so I had my hand up. I just have a question. So, and unfortunately, I was not at the committee meeting to hear the particulars of what the church is wanting. Well, I'm familiar with the church directly next door to Emmanuel Baptist Church. But one, I just wanted to say, the group that is in opposition to it, I'm trying to understand what exactly is their opposition. I'm not familiar with the group, and I've lived over here for 40 years. And so, for there to be a pop-up from the group, for which I don't recall hearing anything in opposition or response to any issue as it relates to at least the Clinton Hill area. What is the opposition from this group specifically?
Again, it's basically they didn't, the design proposing, especially with the LED, they felt that it just was not appropriate. That was basically, they felt that it was not appropriate for Clinton Hill. And
Well,
I know I'm really summarizing and crunching it together, but they basically did, they didn't like the proposal.
Is that group, the group is the group in the past, have the group opposed any other land use issues of that kind that came
Not
before
that
the committee?
Well, with church signs, this is a new area, so they did not oppose the previous church sign. This is something that's new. We're getting more discussions from Clinton Hill groups in general. There's a whole bunch of them, and all calling themselves variation of Clinton Hill Society, Clinton Hill this and that. And it's what's been coming now is it's relatively recent that we've been getting I would say opinions from Clinton Hill. Part of it, I rely on Esther Blunt, one of our committee members, to sort of give us the information that she's really tied in. That's her community. That's her neighborhood. That's her group. But that's where she is. And I've been relying on Esther Blunt to help us and give us information as to which group is which and where there's either support or opposition.
Okay, well, thank you for that. But I think I would like to hear more about the groups that come forth. So I'm gonna have to make my presence to the committee so I can understand, as I appreciate Esther Blount and her input into it concerning these groups. And as I said, I've lived in Clinton Hill for 40 years, and not that I know everything, but I'm just wondering the group pop-ups as it relates to what we're talking about now. Is this church on the corner a very good sort of neighbor church? And there's been no fanfare out of the church. And I know that there are some things that sometimes people ask for that maybe it's too big or too small or too bright or too whatever it is. And I would like just to know more specifically, when the groups have an opposition, specifically what that opposition is. And I think that as a community board member who's lived in this area for 40 years, I should too be able to hear that as others should. So I'm just, interested in that way. And I haven't really heard anything to satisfy me in terms of what specifically is the opposition. Size, lighting, too bright, too dull, whatever those things are.
So let me jump in for a second. I want to take the conversation about this group, this organization, off the table for a minute. And Carol Ann, offline, can you get me a little bit more information about this group? I see in the chat that you mentioned that there are community board members that are part of this group. I'd like for us to get to know this organization a little bit better. I think every group that is advocating for keeping some level of consistency, quality of life, whatever the case may be for their respective community is worth hearing from and engaging with. So if you can get me a little more information, Carol Ann, we'll try to understand more about this group. If they have a mission or a charter, whatever the case may be, we're not objecting to a new organization. I just want to understand the context for what their mission is. So we'll deal with that separately. I do want to reiterate that in the spirit of being helpful, perhaps it's as important to repeat, this committee agreed to work with the church to help them get their application reviewed and approved, which I think is the right spirit. A lot of times, unless you hire an architect, and it depends on the experience that the architect has with the community or even within the context of what is contextually appropriate, that can make things easier or a bit challenging. The fact that the committee wants to work with the church to help them be successful, I think is in the right spirit. Without being at the meeting and actually being able to physically see what was presented, once again, I'm not going to ask this committee report to rehash the committee meeting. The same thing I say to everyone is the same thing I say to myself. You need to go to the meetings to understand what's happening and get the detail. Because we're getting the cliff notes, we're going to stick with what we originally intended, to put this before the body, to vote, and then move forward from there. So without having to rehash the committee meeting, are there any other questions? Go ahead, Dorothea.
I don't have a question. I remembered also about the previous sign and on Emmanuel. And I think part of the reasons that was delayed had to do with concern about illumination hitting the buildings across the street. And so I know the two churches and where they are. And I don't know, exactly what the reasons were. So I was just trying to think if that's one of the reasons, because I don't know what it would hit. It might hit a corner building and it might impact traffic. But if the real thing is it just happens to be that they want to redo the sign, I really have nothing else to say. I was just trying to figure it out myself, because like I said, I remembered the other had to do with illumination to the houses across the street. That was it. I can't vote on this anyway. So I just wanted to make a comment.
The discussion is helpful.
Dorothea, that is correct. That is correct.
Nicole?
I just have one question, and it's for clarity. Was the committee's decision influenced by the CRNP? Was your decision to go against it influenced by that? And the only reason why I'm asking, because if it was, then I have some concerns with that, because the pastor of the other church is a part of this advisory board.
Okay, well, I'm not that familiar. I am not familiar with the group. They've presented themselves as a community group. We always listen to community groups and their opinions, and we take it into account when we want to approve or disapprove an application. We always listen to it. Let's see. Right, I think for Denise, yeah, I would say keep an eye out when the next meeting comes, keep an eye on our agenda so that you can know when it comes back, then we'll be able to partake, in the help in the decision-making. Excuse me.
Any other discussion? John?
Yes. One point of clarification. There were two committee members that voted against. We didn't vote against it. We abstained from the vote for exactly that reason. There were questions about how much illumination would come from the sign, and that was not understood. And I believe that had a lot to do with why the committee agreed to vote against this application. I will tell you that the entire committee was against it until it was made apparent that Emmanuel Baptist Church had a sign approved by the community board that was illuminated. Whether it's freestanding or on the building was not discussed at all. And the one preservation group in Clinton Hill with which we are all familiar is the Clinton Hill Society.
Mhm.
I never heard of this new group that was brought up tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any other discussion? I'm getting tired. Did I take a motion on this already? Aren't we in discussion? Aren't we discussing the motion? Right? Carolyn?
You separated it from the rest of the package, so.
Yeah, but we took a motion and.
Yeah.
we
No,
didn't.
we didn't take, I'll make a motion to accept the committee's recommendation.
I get a second? Ms. Freibush? It's kind of weird. Okay. I normally ask for a motion before I have such an extensive discussion, but okay, fine. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the committee's recommendation? Opposed? Abstentions? Please note that Mr. Smith and Ms. Olive Ringer have abstained. Okay, Carolyn, we got that? Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carlton. Thank you to the team for giving extensive detail to the discussion. Next, we're up to item number 6, committees to report. We'll start with economic development and employment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a meeting in regards to the Small Business Administration, the advocates for the Quick Start Initiative, which basically was something that we were hoping to have as far as the district needs proposal that we gave out last year, and it actually came to fruition in June of this year. And that was basically, we're looking for a department within New York City small business that would actually help small businesses get started. Cut the red tape as far as establishing regulations and also permits to get the businesses up and running. And that's now in process, working, and that's already helped some 5,000 different individuals with regulations and also startups. So that was something we're very happy to see actually get started. In addition to that, we actually worked on the, thank you, NYC Business Quick Start. Okay, and that was very good to see that happen. Basically, as you can see, they're looking for 48-hour response for any questions that people have to help with financing. They will not actually be an individual who will help you actually get the licensings or anything else. They will just give you support and address any questions you may have, and also advise you on how to keep within regulations. So that was very good to hear that. They're also going to start working with all of the bids in the area to actually drill down to the individual small businesses that may not be aware of them yet, but are looking for their aid and help as far as reopening also, okay, after COVID. So that's something that's very useful. In addition to that, we also looked at the special district needs, and we took care of that. What I'm looking to do next month is look at the MWBE. One of the board members mentioned that some of the small businesses have not been able to receive financing or have any input in any of the street restaurants that are going up and around. And we're asking for help with that. So what I'm going to do is basically have someone from the MWBE come in and talk to us, especially after Scott Stringer put out an article that was in the Trains New York Business, okay, in regards to the fact that a lot of minorities and women have not been doing well in the fiscal year with the ongoing COVID situation. In addition to that, I signed up for the virtual urban plan workshop. That's going to be November 12th. And it's going to be from 8:30 a.m. to 4:00 p.m. Currently, a lot of us have been discussing the fact that urban planning has been something that's been pretty much ignored since we did the upzoning And I figured, best way of getting involved in that is actually taking that course. It's still available for those individuals who want to RSVP. So I would definitely suggest that to some individuals, especially with land use. In addition to that, one of the other things I'm looking at is currently right now, there's some indoor programming space that's going on at Governor's Island. They're actually taking bids in, and the proposals need to be in by October 29th. For anyone, for instance, any not-for-profits, art, cultural, educational, environmental organizations, this is an opportunity to get your voice out there and actually be seen or heard. Okay, and I would suggest that to any individuals who want to do that. And finally, Building Works is a pre-apprenticeship training program. Okay, that is currently out there. What this is about is Building Works is a pre-apprenticeship training that prepares individuals for carpenters unions apprenticeships. Okay, this is a 4-year program. Okay, training starts November 8th and ends December 17th. And basically applications are still being accepted, but you have to get your applications in by October 29th. Okay, so unfortunately, it's a very short period, but I thought people should know about this. We've been looking for ways for people to get apprenticeships to actually become involved in the unions, and this is one of those apprenticeships. So I just want to make sure that's out there. It's a 4-year program, and that's my my report.
Thank you, Bill. Just a point of clarification, in your report, you said that you're going to reach out to the MWBE. Who's the MWBE?
Well, minorities and women.
I know what it means. Who is it? You keep saying you're
Who is it? I haven't.
What agency?
I'm reaching out to possibly talk to an individual about this. We haven't had an organization yet, so that's why I just said I'm looking to do something in this area.
Yeah, the reason I asked that question is that's a broad topic, as you well know. There are several agencies or groups and organizations within the district that can speak intelligently to that. So I was just curious if you had identified someone just yet.
No, have not identified an agency as.
All right, cool. Thank you. Next committee to report is the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Singletary. Actually, we have not met. We have a meeting scheduled this week on October the 28th, I believe. And we have a regularly scheduled meeting on November 18th. So I really don't have anything to report as of yet. We did report on our September meeting at the previous general board meeting and also at the executive committee meeting.
All right, good. So it's good to hear your voice.
Okay.
Next committee to report, Health, Environment, and Social Services.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm excited to announce I'm Brandon Smith, and I finally have got a vice chair, Ms. McKnight, who I'm so, honestly, Ms. McKnight has been a really a great member of our committee for the last couple of years, and I've got to say it's a wonderful thing that we're going to be working together. I'm looking forward to it a lot. We had a very full agenda at our last meeting, and I'll try to run through it as briefly as I can, just to give you the highlights, but also to stress some of the more important points. We discussed COVID-19 briefly. We're expecting to get the health department back in for an update at one of our next meetings. I hope that you'll keep your eyes peeled for when that occurs, because we're still very much on top of the issue with 11205 and particularly communities of color with disparate vaccination rates and higher incidences of COVID, even as we're in year 2 of this and not in the absolute emergency that we were in 2020. The big point from our meeting in early October was we had both National Grid and Con Edison in to discuss a range of topics, including climate change, which was really a great kickoff to what I hope will be an ongoing conversation with both providers. To put it simply, we had about an hour-long discussion with National Grid, which was very much focused on their net zero 2050 initiative. And they provided some details of this, where they're aiming to provide net zero carbon emissions across their business, with their customers, with everyone involved by the year 2050. And we tried to drill down with them about, well, how'd you come up with 2050? Seems like there were some consultants involved. There was a discussion about how the issues are very complex and analytical. There was some very long answers. We're gonna need to have, I would think, a follow-up conversation at some point to really focus it on this net zero 2050 initiative, to better understand, I think, how a lot of this is happening with National Grid. They are going to focus first and foremost on energy efficiency of their customers in the short term, and that sounds like it's got about a 2030, 2035 deadline on it. And there were a range of questions about all different topics related to climate change that came up with National Grid, including, there's a document out there on their website called Their Priorities that has a list of things that are supposed to have been completed by the year 2020. And they're going to follow up to confirm to us whether those items have been completed. So I'm looking forward to getting that follow up from them. Con Edison presented a very, I would say, energetic, ambitious plan to become completely 100% clean energy by 2040. And they discussed a range of different proposals or a range of different projects. They're very into electric vehicles. They're very into the smart meters. They have a lot of different items, and I went back and put in literally almost all the detail into a revised version of these minutes, which I hope will be out in advance of the meeting. I'm not going of the general meeting, and hopefully I won't have to go into too much detail about it, but I'm certainly happy to take questions about it. Aside from these proposals, aside from this whole big discussion we had on climate change, we also addressed cybersecurity protocols. And you all may remember there was the Colonial Pipeline incident earlier in the year where some hackers broke into this pipeline and nearly crippled the gas networks in different parts of the East Coast. And we had, in that respect, National Grid brought out their chief technology officer, who categorically explained how you could never have the same situation happen with National Grid that happened with Colonial Pipeline. They have much stronger IT controls. They have segregation of their different computer systems. They have, in Colonial Pipeline's incident involved a terminated employee who apparently still had access to their system. So that was sort of unusual on their part. And it was a really interesting discussion. And it gave me confidence, I think, hearing this, that as a member of the public, we should feel comfortable that we wouldn't have a similar incident occur with National Grid. And Con Ed definitely represented some of the same things. They couldn't share as much detail, but they explained quite a bit about their cybersecurity protocols and described them as very consistent with National Grid's. Thirdly, National Grid provided some very useful information about gas inspections in New York, and how these two programs, the local law 152 program, which is a program where New York City licensed master plumbers have to inspect gas services I think it's every 4 years, is a separate program than the state utility inspections that have to be done every 3 years and have to be done by somebody who possesses a task 8687 qualification. So the goal was to sort of explain how these are two different programs. put the message out there for that it's important to try to find, if you're a homeowner, to try to find somebody who's got this task 86, 87 qualification, because they might be able to do both of the required processes. And additionally, they're looking to potentially bring legislation in the future that will harmonize these two programs together, so that homeowners don't have to deal with the inconsistencies, and incentivize those homeowners who go with somebody who's 86, 87 qualified for their New York City inspection. So that was a really, really robust and discussion, all of those different topics. We also had a community liquor license applicant discussion regarding a comedy club that is trying to move into this building down on Park Avenue near the BQE. And the board office has been very helpful in working with the applicant and the community and some very concerned residents with putting together this virtual community town hall, so that they can talk to each other and sort of better understand how they're all going to be able to get along and work together. I think it was a good diplomatic conversation, and we will follow up with them one last time in December, and this will be a good success, and really an example of how the community board can work to support residents in learning more and helping to feel more comfortable with certain liquor license establishments. Finally, we had our liquor licenses, which was a discussion in of itself, which we talked about at the general board meeting. I won't repeat that. And we voted on our district needs for our committee, which had been a month-long discussion with input from a lot of different people across the board. And I was grateful for all the board members who showed up too at the meeting, who were not part of the committee, because it was great to have their participation and suggestions. So I'll be happy to take any questions, but that's the best summary I can give of our meeting.
Thanks, Brandon. I appreciate the update. Betty.
Yeah, hi. I'm just curious with this Lafayette Comedy Club, like it seems to be noted on our district calendar or district weekly notices. Why are we, is there a reason we're promoting them or noticing their activities as opposed to other venues?
So I don't think we're promoting them necessarily, nor are we choosing to highlight them in specific. I think the reason why we have this as a community related item is it's related to a very special circumstance. So in June of 2021, this matter came before our committee. And at that time, the board office had worked out a process where applicants for liquor licenses didn't have to get signatures of support before they came because of COVID. So we hadn't completed with that process yet. And when the applicant came and spoke to us, they were going to put a comedy club into a residential building. And we had to make a decision because of the 30-day notice, but there hadn't been a wholesome resident and community conversation. And because of this, there was a suggestion that they reach out not just to the residents, but also to the surrounding community, because there are people who live by who are not necessarily in that building. And the board office graciously offered to help with facilitating that meeting. And there definitely seems to be an audience in this community. So I think it's kind of a unique circumstance, but it's not intended to be a endorsement or a sponsorship for the business. It's really just to be a forum for members of the surrounding local community to chat with this comedy club operator about their proposed establishment.
So Betty, just to amplify Brandon's point,
Thank you.
in a more condensed way, this is a town hall. So we're within the right of what we've consistently done is to promote information about a town hall. What happens to be here is that the applicant and the place where the town hall is being hosted are one and the same, but this is under the context of a town hall, not the applicant being the comedy club.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brandon. Next committee to report, Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. That was quite a meeting you had, Brandon. What we had at our last meeting was an update from the Parks Department on capital projects and a capital needs analysis on parks within our district. Just to highlight a few items. First of all, as you've heard me talk about before, that many projects have been either delayed or were halted due to COVID, and that now they're trying to get them back, started up. So one in particular, Commodore Barry Park, who we've paid a lot of attention to. Unfortunately, they have found in looking at the field that there's some underneath the field, there seems to be some issue about remediation. So they are going to be looking into that and assessing it. They've assured us that they don't think it's problematic. It just has to be addressed before the actual work is started. The good news is that Bridge Park 2, which is now known as Susan Smith McKinney Stewart Park, is under construction. There's work going on at the Brooklyn War Memorial. Kyler Gore and Green Playground are in the design phase and moving forward on that. And one issue that came up was concerning Cadman Plaza Park was on the War Memorial, some roof problems. As it turns out, those had not been included, but there is a report on the status of those roof problems. So our Chris Yandoli, who's the director of capital projects for parks in Brooklyn, assured us that he would bring that issue to the attention of the Brooklyn commissioner and see what could be done about that. So there are a number of other projects which they would like to get funding for, but at the moment don't have that, but they're working on it. Of course, we had a number of questions. My question, which of course we don't have an answer to, I think a lot of us are always frustrated that projects with the parks take forever, several years, and hopefully perhaps with a new administration, there will be some new protocols adopted so that we could see these projects come to fruition much sooner than they do now. We also mentioned at the meeting the unveiling of the new Spanish Memorial plaque in Fort Greene Park, which is near the War Memorial there. It replaces, as you know, a plaque given by Spain in 1976 and commemorates both our friendship with Spain and the loss of Spanish soldiers during the Revolutionary War. And that certainly, it was a lovely ceremony, and that the plaque itself and was an issue that the Parks Committee had certainly reviewed and voted upon. And finally, we had representatives from the New York City Bike Polo Association, and basically that's playing polo on bicycles. And right now, they have been using Steuben Park to do this, and they are really looking for a permanent base for their for holding these events. So Mr. Yandoli offered to work with them and try to help them out to try to identify some areas, whether or not in our district, we don't know. Thanks, Taya. And to see if they could find a home. And certainly this is the first I've been heard about this sport, but it clearly has been around for quite a while and has a lot of enthusiasts. So that's our report from our last meeting. And I just wanted to mention, if you haven't gone into the statement of needs yet and put in your approval or your consensus. It is the easiest thing possible, so please go ahead and do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next committee to report, Transportation and Public Safety. Mr. John Quinn is representing the committee tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As many of you may know, Mr. Meyer was not at the meeting and cannot be here today because he is, as I've put it, galloping in the Galapagos. And he's taking a trip down to the equator and that part of the world. And he actually was at our meeting. He called in for a portion of the meeting because he was still in Ecuador on the mainland and had not yet gone over to the Galapagos Islands. So he was able to call in, but he didn't have a good connection. And he said, and we have to believe him, that it was time for dinner, so he had to leave. But he was at our meeting for a portion of it. We had two presentations, which we took 2 votes on, and I guess you will tell me, Lenny, how we're going to handle the votes, because I don't know if it has to go to the full board or not. The first presentation, and both of them were approved by the board, by the committee unanimously. The first presentation had to do with—
John, those items will be held over to the next meeting. So there's no need to talk about any action items tonight.
No, okay. Well, what we did was to handle these 2 items, one involving 9 DeKalb and one involving a revocable consent for a townhouse on State Street. And that took up the bulk of our meeting. We also, the bulk of our meeting was devoted to discussing the statement of the 23 Statement of Needs and Budget Priorities, and Carol Ann led the committee in a very long discussion about the 29 or so items on a spreadsheet that had been developed since the spring and over the summer and refined to be part of the package that Barbara just spoke about. And I urge you all, I did my priorities, and it's very easy, and you actually learn a lot by just reading the priorities. That was the bulk of those 3 items, the discussion and the 2 presentations were the bulk of our meeting, and which happened only last Thursday. And so there are no minutes even to distribute. But that was what we talked about. And I guess you'll hear about the presentations from Sid in a month.
Thanks, John. Mr. Du, you have a question?
I don't have a question, but there is something that was presented that is not being brought up tonight. I presented a request that the community board send a letter to the MTA and DOT to review the bus stop on DeKalb as it approaches Flatbush Avenue. The B38 bus, which is now a tandem bus, so they're very long. They also have a limited bus that runs on that line so that 2 buses arrive at Flatbush Avenue at the same time. The second bus, because those buses are long, opens its doors in front of the parked cars. Those cars that are parked on Flatbush next to LIU, those spots were wasn't requested. DOT gave the community board those spots in exchange for removing parking spots from Ashland Avenue. The point is that passengers being discharged in the middle of the street is dangerous. And DOT and the MTA need to come out and make a recommendation based on the new tandem buses that let people off in the middle of the street all the time. This is not isolated. Folks want to get off the bus. They're very happy to get off in the middle of the street in front of cars and have to make their way to the curb. But the buses should not be letting people off not at the curb. So Mr. Quint felt that we needed to wait till next month to ask the MTA and DOT to examine that. And I frankly think that it's an emergency that we should be asking to get resolved immediately, if not sooner. That's it.
So John, I did see your email on this topic. Let me in the board office, to give your request a little further consideration. Let me touch base with Sid either through email, and then we'll come back to you with the next course of action.
Thank you.
No problem. Mr. John Quint, is there anything else for your report?
No, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you for filling in. I appreciate it. Next committee to report is Youth Education and Cultural Affairs.
Yeah, good evening. First, I want to acknowledge that my co-chair Dorothea Thompson Manning has a new role in communicating with Borough Hall, and it sounds very exciting. And I wish her and the board good luck in that communication, which is very critical for our work. So congratulations, Dorothea. We didn't have meetings since the last time I spoke to the group, but I did want to report that District 13 is doing monthly town hall meetings by Zoom with a focus, not just, a lot of information and a lot of stuff, but it's presentations and discussions about how to become an anti-racist district. And they have different consultants as well as people from the district that are engaging parents, faculty, and community in this important work. And it's always been important. It's even more important now that the Gifted and Talented program, which we know has had more, has been disproportionate, having more white and Asian students and so on. Since that's going to be reconfigured or changed, it's being stopped now, according to the current mayor, but the next mayor is going to do something else. So it's important to engage, all of our parents in our community in this if we really hope and are working toward becoming an anti-racist district and an integrated district, because the Gifted and Talented, of course, were not an integrated program. So I urge people to at least get on the list so that you can find out the dates of the meeting. Taya, thank you for posting these dates. And I believe it's a good use of time and encourage people to join. So thank you all.
Thank you, Betty. So that concludes agenda item number 6. Moving on to agenda item number 7, other committee business. At the last meeting, or maybe the last few meetings, we've discussed the possibility or the intention to change the meeting schedule so that it could be more in line with some of the items that come before the community board and by extension the district office, and having some sense of at least an attempt to bring some logic for how things are brought before us, the timing, with, as an example, a way of not having so many things come before the exec committee for a vote, that they can really be discussed at a greater levels to even the general body and the committees. And so with that, I will call on multiple occasions asking everyone to take it to their respective committees. And as you see, as Taya has on the screen, and if you can't tell it by the speed, Taya has a lot of excitement about this. And so with that, what you'll see is, again, the proposed. I've not received any negative feedback. I think all of it that I've seen is that the conversations that each of you had as chair or co-chairs, your committees have seemed to be supportive of this. So with that, we're going to present this to the general body, and with the hopes that we get feedback from the entire community board. And if all is successful, we'll look to implement this in the new year. So starting with our first meeting, or starting with January 1st, we would be able to possibly implement that. To be a little bit more tempered in the comments and the excitement, let me just say that it is the desire to, barring any feedback in a negative way from the entire community board, that we would look to implement this in the first quarter. And the reason I'm saying first quarter and not so much January 1st is the formats for meeting is still a bit of an unknown. So we don't know if virtual will still be allowed. We also don't have a sense of if we'll have a location to meet. So there's some other logistical things that we need to work out. But all in all, I think this is the right structure for us to move forward, given the various things that we have to contend with throughout our calendar year. So thank you all for reaching out to your respective committees. Thank you for the feedback. And in this context, no feedback from me is going to be positive for the committee chair. So if I don't have any feedback from you, that means I'm moving forward. So thank you all for that. Moving to the next agenda item, number 8, community forum. And so if there are individuals that are on the call tonight and you are not a member of the exec committee, but you have a topic that you'd like for us to hear about or discuss, please, this is your opportunity to give an update, and you have 2 minutes to speak. So do we have anybody who wishes to speak tonight? And if so, if you could identify yourself in the chat, and that way Taya and Carol Ann would be helpful in helping me identify who you are. Okay, great. The next agenda item I have.
My hand was raised. This is John again.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Gowanus is currently going through the upzoning that we voted on in terms of the canal. There are 86 blocks, 4 of which are in Community Board 2. Of note is that as part of this upgrade, the project as a whole is having to supply lots of upgrades to the public housing projects that are in the district. The Gowanus houses, and I'm forgetting the name of the other public houses that are in that area. Unfortunately, in 2004, that option was not available in Community Board 2. And in fact, the residents of downtown Brooklyn were actually removed due to building condemnation. And I believe, this is my personal opinion, have helped contribute to the large amount of homelessness that we have in the district. Going back to the Gowanus project, they're looking at AMI at a 50% or less computation, as opposed to what we have here in downtown Brooklyn, often at 80% or 100%, or even in some instances, 130%. And the MTA, as a second item, has approved for all applications a 20% growth in building in order to supply work for ADA access to the subway stations. We need to get more details on that to see what it affects and whether we can go backwards and take advantage of some of that as it relates to all of our subways in downtown Brooklyn that all need ADA upgrade with the exception of the few that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That's helpful. Appreciate you bringing those 2 items to other business. I think we all know we need to stay on top of the MTA for various reasons. And then like I continue to state, let me say it that way, as I continue to state, independent of how much of the Gowanus project sits in Community Board 2, it sits in Community Board 2. So the fact that it sits in Community Board 2 gives us the right to speak out and be consistent in the things that we want to bring attention to. So don't get fooled by how much sits in Community Board 2. Focus on the fact that it does sit in Community Board 2. So that's important to reiterate. We can't lose sight of that. These are 2 very massive projects that in some ways will help to change for the good or the bad or the neutral, right? What happens in Community Board 2 by extension, but particularly what happens for Brooklyn and really all of New York City. So we can't have a closed eye on any of those 2 items. They're very important. Any other comments from non-board exec committee members? I'll say it that way for this section of the agenda. Let me scroll in case I miss somebody with their hand up like I did a minute ago. All right, great. According to my agenda, the next item is adjournment. Is anybody opposed to adjourning? Perhaps there's any discussion on the motion. Good night, everyone. Get home safe.
Night.
Good night.
Right.
Good night.
Good night.